the GoPro Hero 8 Black is the current cutting edge of action camera development. And we've already been talking about this for the last week or so. So today I want to tell you what I think are the best tips and tricks to get the most out of this. Because even though I've been kind of hard on it, I do think this can be a fantastic camera that can give you really good image quality. Let's get to it. What's up everyone, I'm the Everyday Dad, and if I can figure it out, you can figure it out. So again, I love action cameras. The GoPro Hero 8 Black is currently the top of the line of the GoPro market, and I have been very, very impressed with both the colors and the image quality coming out of this camera. Let me share with you how to do that. Now, first up, you may notice that normally when I do a tips and tricks video, we've got like HDMI, we're recording externally, we're making it really cool and fancy. Today we're doing this with the camera looking at it. Say hi to the other camera, GoPro. Hi, other camera. Because one of the negatives about the GoPro Hero 8 Black is there is no HDMI out unless you buy an additional accessory. So we're just gonna be doing this a little bit backwards than we normally do it. So first up, the very first thing you need to do if you're gonna get the GoPro Hero 8 Black is you have to download the new firmware. The current updated firmware as of today is 1.20. Like, that is the most up to date. And what that gives you is a whole bunch of benefits, from stabilization to new recording modes like 4K 30 linear mode, which is probably one of the most important if you want to use this as like a vlogging camera. So you have to go, you download. The quickest way to do that is you connect your GoPro to your phone and you download it through the app Go That Way. It'll take a few minutes, but that is the first. That is, if you don't listen to a single other tip and trick out of this video, you have got to update the firmware, or the camera is just it's not worth getting. The second major tips and tricks, and this is something that I really want to explain, I kind of talked about it during the Osmo Action video, is the stabilization in the GoPro Hero 8 is different than any other GoPro stabilization. Normally you have stabilization on or off. Well, here you have a lot of choices. So you've got hyper smooth and you can turn it on or off. Now, off obviously means that you're not getting any kind of stabilization. If you turn it on to Hypersmooth 2.0, it will crop in about 10%, and it gives you roughly the same quality that you would get out of like the GoPro Hero 7 Black with Hypersmooth. At least I know it's still called 2.0, that's what I've seen. You also have the high setting, which will crop in, it says it crops the same amount. I think it crops a little bit more, but this has actually been the mode that I've been preferring to use when I go out, and I've been using this basically as a running camera, and this gives you the best option. And you can go up to boost, which should theoretically give you the best stabilization, but I've been kind of having like problems with it warping. Now, I think it works fine and okay if you're in really good light and you are just doing something like hand holding the camera or you're walking around, that's perfectly fine. But if you're gonna do something like I've been running and trying to use that at the same time, it gives this really bad warp and basically makes your footage unusable. So my tip for stabilization is keep it in the high mode and keep it as wide as possible, because it will crop in a little more, and that gives you really, I mean, some fantastic results that I've got just holding the camera, you know, out like this while out running, and it gives you, I mean, yeah, the camera sways a little bit, but the footage looks really good. Next up, and this is kind of disappointing to me, I'm not very happy about this tip. My tip would be, if you're gonna buy this camera, go out and buy a screen protector, because as you may have noticed, if you didn't watch any of my previous videos, the GoPro Hero 8 Black does not have a built-in lens protector like the Hero 7 Black. You see that? That is a removable lens cover that if it cracks, you just put on a new one. Now I have had a few comments saying that this is to reduce fogging. I guess people have had problems with fogging on the Hero 7 Black. I've used this thing on mountain bike trails for hours at a time in the United States, Georgia South. And I've never had a fogging problem. If you have had one, just because I've never had one doesn't mean you're never gonna have one. But if you've had one, maybe this will do better for you. But if you're gonna get the Hero 8 Black, absolutely go get a screen protector, because if you scratch this, you're done. The camera is basically done, because I'm not gonna pay extra for an insurance policy on an action camera. I pay for an insurance policy on my phone because the phone's not meant to be durable. This is meant to be durable. So buy the screen protector, super tip. Maybe that should be tip number 1. I'm gonna buy the screen protector. My next tip is really about if you wanna use this as a vlogging camera. We already kind of talked about it with the stabilization modes, but I think the best way, like we already said, the stabilization crops in a little bit, you should go to wide and then crop into the 2.0 stabilization. So wide, high, that will give you the most, like, the problem with action cameras, right, is they always have like this wide fisheye distortion if you keep it in their like widest settings. And one of the problems if you're gonna use linear mode, which is the normal vlogging mode on the GoPro Hero 8 Black, if you wanna use boost or something like that, it just looks funny and it's a little too tight. You don't want your vlogging camera to be too tight because then like people don't necessarily watch that kind of content to see your face. I mean, yes, your face is important. We all love your face. I frankly love my face, but they really wanna see everything that's going on around you. And this gives you the option, if you put it into standard view with the stabilization on high, you'll get the best bang for your buck. I wouldn't go wide is the best because you can't even do super view. Like if you try to do super view with 2.0 or anything like that, you can't. All you can do is regular hyper smooth or off hyper smooth. You can't do super view with like the more stable options, which is unfortunate. And something else, so something that I've had a legitimate problem with the GoPro Hero 8 Black is white balance. And this sounds weird, I know, right? White balance is not normally something that you'd have a problem with on an action camera, but let me show you something that I found, and it kind of confused me at first. If this is new to you, like, I guess don't worry about it, but this was new to me, and I use cameras all the time. So a lot of times cameras have auto white balance, right? That's not new. Cameras have had that for a very long time. But the thing that GoPro has on here, which really confused me, is they have native white balance. And I assumed that native meant auto. Native does not mean auto. And if you use native, I don't know what they're trying to go for, but it really makes the footage, even if you're in the GoPro colors, it makes it look just like really flat and off. It makes the colors, everything look off. And yes, if you have your white balance wrong in any camera, the GH5 right now, if I have the white balance off, the image is gonna look bad. But don't use native here. Now GoPro, if you're watching, please let us know in the comments below like what native is for. I can't figure it out, but don't fall into the trap that native might mean auto, because it certainly doesn't. Auto means auto. If you're not gonna manually balance in your white balance, you're not gonna go to like 5500 Kelvin, 5600, you're not gonna go in the daylight balances, you're not gonna like do something fancy that you wanna do, absolutely use auto, don't use native. And a new tip that you may not know because you haven't seen any of my videos, but the GoPro Hero 8 Black is the first GoPro camera to have selectable like bit rates. So one of the problems that GoPro used to have, like on the 7 Black and everything before that, is the 4K was in like 70 megabits per second, which is pretty low. And if you have a lot of movement in the picture, you will have problems like with artifacting or something like that. Or if you wanna put it in the flat profile and you wanna push the colors a little bit, you're gonna have problems the less information you have. So if you really wanna get the most out of your camera, you gotta turn on Pro Tune, 4K 30 wide hyper smooth, and then you go to bitrate, and you can choose bitrate high and low, and this will affect the 4K and 2.7K options, which again, you really need to do. It will mean you need a faster memory card. It will cause you to have a little bit more editing power or processing power, but everything else, like if you've used an Osmo Action or if you've used another camera's 4K, generally it's in the 100 megabits category anyway, so I would absolutely always have this turned on. If you have an SD card that's already gonna be recording 4K, like a V3 card, it's probably gonna be able to handle this anyway, so turn on the high bitrate, turn it on. Another tip, and this is kind of like a tip for overall GoPros, not necessarily the Hero 8 Black, but something that I've discovered is the more you wanna manually dial this in, the more problems you're gonna have. And maybe that sounds like counterintuitive because I do have manual mode set up on all my other cameras, but for this one, I always keep the shutter in auto. Why? Because I use the stabilization. The electronic image stabilization on these cameras needs high shutter speeds to do the algorithmic calculations. So always, again, that's a Pro Tune setting where you could change it and follow the 180-degree shutter speed rule, which basically means you want your shutter speed to be twice your frame rate. So we're recording in 4K 30 frames per second. So I would want the shutter speed to be 1/60th. And you can choose all that stuff here, like 4K, you can do 30, 60, 120, 240, all of that stuff. But just a tip for GoPros in general, just keep it in auto, let the GoPro do it. Will you have the most perfect motion blur? No, you won't. But if you want more perfect motion blur, get a bigger camera. Like if you're using an action camera, it's got a tiny sensor anyway, always turn it into auto shutter speed. Another thing when it comes to exposure compensation, you've heard me say this in every GoPro video ever, the most important thing is the auto ISO in GoPro cameras is hyper aggressive. Even if you are in decent lighting and you think that you're not gonna have a problem, generally the GoPros like err on the side of caution. They will jack up that shutter speed and the ISO at the same time, and then you'll get that really grainy footage because it's an action camera. So you have to do this, is go into your ISO min and max, cap the ISO max at 400. Like, don't let it go anywhere above 400. It normally, I think, is set to like 1600 or something like that. It's always set way too high. Take it down, it's really easy. Set it to 400, that way you will get a much nicer, cleaner image. Yes, if you're gonna go outside in like the darkness, the night, yeah, turn that up a little bit higher just so you can get your footage. At that point, getting the footage at all is the most important. Who cares about the grain? But if you're just gonna be using this like in normal settings, always cap that ISO max, because what'll happen is you'll walk by a tree, hey, what's going on? You'll go through, the shadow will go on your face, it'll jack that ISO up, and your footage will get ruined. ISO max, it's super aggressive. I mean, I appreciate that they're gonna put like aggressive technology in here to compensate for those of us like me that are bad with cameras, but you gotta give it, you gotta be like, look, I get it, not right now. Another quick tip, and this is a new thing on the GoPro Hero 8, it's not on the 7, 6, or 5. You can set these little like standard layouts. You see I've got my standard 4K 30 wide with the Hypersmooth 2.0 on high. I've got my super view for when I'm running. I've got a slow motion setting. Cinematic was in there. I didn't pick it. I'm not a cinematic filmmaker. But you can customize these as you see fit, and then you can also create more. So you can choose settings, and you can build this profile to be however you want. If you find yourself, if you're just a person that uses, like I use this setting, I use this setting, I use this setting, I use 30 frames per second, I use super view, I use slow motion, that's it. Set them here. It is so much easier because like I've said throughout this whole video, I'm a runner. I run with this camera all the time. So if I'm running, all I have to do is tap, scroll, tap, done. Because one of the problems, and you may have noticed this in the DJI Osmo Action video, in the DJI comparison video, trying to change these on the fly is a big pain. It's a huge, huge pain in the butt. So absolutely use these to your advantage, because one of the negatives that I had about the Hero 7 is the tap to choose settings. Because tapping and then like, oh, I hit 24 instead of 30. Oh, I hit 60 instead of 30. Here you can just set and go, not waste your time. Get it. And then last but certainly not least of the tips that I found, and this is something that is pretty unique to the GoPro Hero 8 that I've not seen on another action camera, and I think it's GoPro's way to like try to try to streamline the capabilities of this camera and changing it very quickly. So there are quick settings, and you can see them right here. These 4 things are fully customizable, and I love customization options in cameras. You've heard me say this all of the time. I like being able to decide what I want a camera to do. I don't like a manufacturer deciding that. So you can take these and change these to anything. You just hold on it, and then look, in the upper right-hand corner, you can go from raw audio, wind, you can change the color, the sharpness, the ISO max, min, white balance, EV comp, shutter, bitrate, clips, zoom, low light, hyper smooth, lens, slow-mo, off. You can turn them off if you want to. But I really like these. The things I'm trying to change is, look, I'm trying to make sure that I've got the right lens that I want. Look at that, boom, change it. Maybe I didn't want that. Maybe my SD card's about to fill up, so I need to dial back the bitrate a little bit. So we're gonna drop that down to low so I can save as much storage as possible. Or I'm using this, oh hey, maybe I wanna be able to zoom in while I'm here. There we go, we can use the up to 2 times digital zoom. And it's just, you can customize this. I love customization in cameras. And the more I play around with the GoPro, the more I am really liking this customization thing. You can turn it on to the slow motion if you have it in like 120 frames per second, or you have it in a 60 frames per second setting. You can turn it to do the slow motion in camera, or if you just want to record it like normal, you can just have it in your setting. Turn on slow motion, boom, done. Hey, now I want to go back over to the narrow. I want to go up to super view, done. I like this. You can change it. You've got 4 options to how you want to do that. I very much like that. But yeah, these are my top tips and tricks to get the most out of your GoPro Hero 8 Black. What are some, if you've got one, or if you've got any kind of an action camera, what are some of your favorite tips on how to get the most out of your camera? Please leave those below. Let us all know, like, what are the best options out there, because we're all learning here together. I don't know everything. No offense, but you probably don't know everything either, so if we all learn together, that's even the best. And heck, if you liked this video, I bet you would absolutely love the video where I compared this against the Osmo Action, and you can find that right here. Thanks for watching.